Does the latest and greatest photo gear determine whether your photographs have any value, if they're any good? Of course the answer is no, but I want to explore why people think this, why that mentality exists. My name's David Miller. I'm a Los Angeles-based creative, multimedia artist, photographer, educator. I've taught a lot of classes to adults in photography, and I've also taught it in high schools, and I've worked in camera stores. And I've noticed over the years that photography attracts a different type of person to it. Not everybody has this mentality, but being that a lot of other art forms are perceived as things that you need to be born with, the innate talent like acting, dance, painting, illustration, singing. Photography is like a very familiar thing to most people. Everybody's taking pictures on their phone or with a point and shoot film camera if they're a certain age. And so I think that as an expensive hobby, it attracts people who have money to burn, who are possibly a little more arrogant. Certainly I've met a lot of people who have paired the creative aspect of photography with the idea that we're going on adventure trips that cost a lot of money, or we're doing model shoots and we're booking models and they cost a lot of money. And that mentality is not one that I particularly agree with. I don't follow everybody home and see what they're doing with their photos or why they're making them, but I'm just letting it be known that I've encountered a lot of people who are really into it for the gear aspect and the sort of expensive hobby aspect of photography. Now, that's all fine. Everybody can have their reasons for why they want to do what they want to do. The trickle-down effect that I've seen is that young, talented people have this inadequate feeling about using gear that's maybe like 5, 6, 10 years old, or they think they can't compete if they're putting themselves out there as a freelancer. I think because the assumption is that photos taken on cameras and lenses created in 2023 and 2024 somehow superior to ones that were made in 2017 or 100 years ago. And that's just not true. That's a false notion perpetuated by the people who are into it for the gear aspect and go on forums and social media and make sure that whatever great photo you're looking at that they took, what lens, what aperture, what camera body, what high-end brand of flash they used. Now, the quality of an image is not determined by its recording mechanism. And knowing the gear and the technical details that went into a photo can be interesting trivia, but let's be honest, do people go, oh, Vincent van Gogh's paintings are so good, they're brilliant, I wonder what brushes he used, what brand of paint is it? And it's useful if you as a creator are going to be influenced like spiritually by using gear that's similar to an icon. I get wanting to, play guitar and use the same effects as the Edge from U2 or somebody like that, where you're really into the sound they generate. But we all have to recognize that concept, lighting, subject matter, what you bring to the table, your point of view, those things vastly outweigh what gear it was created with. And that stuff that I just mentioned is transferable between all types of gear. So while something's going to be different if I use a Fuji camera, or I use a Sony camera, or I use a medium format camera, or a disposable camera with film, something's going to be different between each one of those objects. At a certain point, you're going to recognize it as a David Miller image, or you're going to recognize it as like part of the general art aesthetic that I'm trying to put out there. And I got to be honest with you, the guys that are like totally gear obsessed and think that the most critical things in a photo are the technical details and how expensive their stuff is, I've never seen any of those guys make photos that I personally can relate to or care about. To be perfectly honest, the higher the production and the more polish that's put on an image, the less I personally relate to it. And again, I think that isn't so much about oh, they've got expensive gear and now the photo is bad, by my opinion. No, that's not it. It's that the emphasis is on the wrong thing. The emphasis is on technical stuff and not the heart or the ideas or the relationship between subject and photographer. So if you're a young person out there and you're using a hand-me-down camera, for your college classes, your high school classes, and you're kind of like struggling internally because you think your work isn't good enough because it's not the latest and greatest, I'm here to tell you it does not matter. The only technical details I would say are really critical is if you have a vision and you need to execute it with a particular object, in which case you don't have to buy gear all the time. You can rent it as needed for way cheaper than it costs to buy the gear. Also, there's more than one way to achieve a creative goal, so you can always explore cheaper options. And then the last thing I would say is that there are certain technical specifications that people want if they're hiring you for freelance. For example, everybody wants 4K video or 8K. They probably are not looking for a 1080p music video in 2024. So you might have to be honest with yourself that certain technical details are non-negotiable, but that doesn't mean that you have to blow $5,000 just to stay competitive. If you're a young creative out there and you have minimal gear and it's a little bit older, keep in mind that there's nearly 200 years worth of history in photography, and a lot of it was shot on cameras older than 2024. In fact, I would wager almost all of it is shot on cameras older than 2024. And that didn't stop anybody from making amazing images every decade since photography's been invented. So you do not have to have the most expensive gear to make the best work. In fact, from my point of view, if you're leaning on that as your selling point, that you own all this great stuff, chances are you're probably not making work that is great. Chances are you're probably not making work that is anything special. Best of luck in your own creative endeavors. Talk to you next time.